Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Just a quick heads up, I very recently interviewed Alluvial's guitarist and mastermind, Wes Hauch. So, if following this album review you want to learn even more about this particular record from this particular band, all you gotta do is click the link in the description of this video. Sarcoma is the second studio album from American progressive metal crew Alluvial, a project originally conceived as an instrumental collaboration between Keith Marrow and the aforementioned Wes Hauch that has since evolved and expanded into what it is today. Featuring Kevin Moeller of Suffocation, Pyrexia, and Merciless Concept fame on lead vocals, featuring Tim Walker from Entheos on bass, Matthew Paolazzo on drums, who's worked with everyone from Decrepit Birth to Adiotic to the Zenith Passage to the Black Dahlia Murder, and finally the aforementioned Wes Hauch on guitar, who we should note has performed with a variety of different projects across the last decade, including The Faceless, Black Crown Initiate, Devin Townsend, Glass Casket, Thy Art is Murder, and many more. In my interview with Wes Hauch, which by the way, once again, you can check out in the very description of this video, he made it very clear that he wanted this album to be a reboot for Alluvial, and that he in turn views this as the band's official debut album. He made it very clear to me that he wanted Sarcoma and Alluvial as a whole to be more cohesive, to be more powerful, to be more memorable. He wanted not just lead vocals, but really strong choruses and melodies with traditional songwriting interwoven with really flashy, technical, progressive guitar work. Wanting to shift away from the instrumental jam sessions of The Deep Longing for Annihilation and turn Alluvial into something more substantial. And I fully believe that with Sarcoma, Wes and the rest of Alluvial have absolutely achieved that, as the album is chock full of emotive and powerful vocal performances and melodies and choruses, with super tight, intense, hyper-technical jams and grooves and riffs, and some of the most insane guitar wizardry and manipulation I think I've heard out of Wes in a long time. Whereas in previous projects like The Faceless or Black Crown Initiate, he was more or less a hired gun, now he has the chance to really shine, to really show the world what he's made of, to flex his muscles, to stretch his wings, to let his freak flag fly, resulting in an extremely well-produced and executed slice of modern progressive death metal and deathcore that is every bit as heavy as it is catchy, every bit as accessible as it is versatile and diverse and weird and intelligent. Take, for instance, the album's title track, Sarcoma, an incredibly abrasive and angular and intense piece of proggy deathcore. There are huge, genty grooves and beats scattered across this thing, some fierce, bellowing vocals from Kevin Moeller. So fierce that I can't help but feel bad for Suffocation having canned him. The guitar solo in particular, for lack of a better term, is just downright fucking orgasmic. There is some absolutely wild guitar manipulation right at the very beginning of it, may I add, that literally makes that sound as if the song itself is screaming and screeching in agony, in pain. From what I understand too, the name Sarcoma comes from a rare type of cancer that affects the connective tissues in your body, and that's weirdly appropriate because, you know, it kind of sounds like you just read out the cancer diagnosis to the song itself, and it doesn't really know how to process the information, so it just kind of freaks the fuck out. There's also Sleepers Become Giants, an incredibly evocative and brutal slow burning cut, which contrasts some really heavy, ham-fisted riffs with some genuinely really nice cleans and a powerful anthemic chorus. Definitely look for this to be a staple in Alluvial's live set, should the band ever get the chance to tour in the near future. Hard to tell, cause, you know, COVID, but here's hoping, right? Although the award for favorite cut on the record would probably be shared between two cuts, Sugar Paper and 40 Stories. The former being an absolutely scorching prog metal banger, almost sounding like the long-lost mutant freak child of Meshuggah and Animals as Leaders, whereas the latter is a lot more emotive, a lot more evocative, and a lot more heartfelt in some aspects. Initially, the song feels very intimate and dour. There's a jazz-like delicacy and finesse to a lot of the guitar playing that is really fascinating. It's later contrasted with some really heavy grooves, some really great Fallujah-style guitar leads, and some more great vocals from Kevin Moeller. But the real star is Wes Hauch himself, again, not because of the guitar work per se this time around, but because of his own vocal contributions. He actually shares lead vocals on this track with Kevin, but whereas Kevin opts for a more straightforward kind of deathcore death metal vocal performance, Wes is going for something still a little bit softer, you know? His voice is a lot smokier, there's a lot more gravel and rasp to it. And it makes 40 Stories such an immediately potent and powerful cut. And what's most fascinating about all of this is that, again, according to Wes in my interview, apparently 40 Stories was never meant to have vocals at all from either Wes or Kevin. It was originally conceived as an entirely instrumental piece that they slapped vocals on at almost literally the last minute. I will say, though, as good as so much of this material is, the album does start off on a relatively soft and weak kind of note with the tracks Ulysses and Thy Underling. They're by no means terrible or even mediocre, really, but they're also definitely not as catchy or inventive as a majority of the material on this album. On top of that, I found most of the lyrics to be somewhat one-dimensional and forgettable, and the album's super heavy sound mix and production does sometimes mean that instruments blur together when everything gets especially intense. Still, though, I do think that Wes and Alluvial ultimately achieved what they set out to do with Sarcoma. This album is bigger, bolder, and far more powerful than Deep Longing for Annihilation, and I would feel very comfortable giving this a very enthusiastic 3.5 out of 5. If you're a fan of modern prog metal, or more specifically a fan of any of the bands I've mentioned at any point in this video, I see no reason whatsoever why you wouldn't be absolutely elated with this fucking thing from start to finish. Same goes for virtually anyone who's been following Wes over the years. I am curious to see if people will perhaps be disappointed by there not being more instrumental numbers on this thing, considering this did start off as an instrumental collaboration, again, between Wes and Keith. And with that in mind, I'd be curious to hear if maybe some people were hoping that Keith himself would be a part of this album. But even so, I don't picture it being a massive hurdle, especially not when Sugar Paper, quite frankly, is a better instrumental number than almost the entirety of Deep Longing for Annihilation. No disrespect to that album, but holy shit, Sugar Paper kinda fucks. So 3.5 out of 5, an insanely enthusiastic one at that. Definitely keep an eye out for this if you're looking for some super tasty modern prog metal. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.